I'm working on a book called The Culture of Litigation with changing dates, so I just left them off. And what we want to talk about today is adding the perspective of the British Periodicals database. And you can see I've identified myself as an amateur, although that probably overstates a digital humanist. However, I do know a good deal about Romanticism, and this is a project that I'm in the middle of. And it comes from an interest in how information during the Romantic period about law and laws and litigation and so on get consolidated. And the sub area of it is the question of how the periodical culture, on which I've written a book before databases, I was kind of upset about that timing, on how those periodicals fostered changes in discourse. So I thought what I'd do is sort of guide you a little bit through how I came to think that a digital humanities approach might be useful, and then some of the hopes about what use it might be. So the British periodicals, this is just a quick screenshot. And if you can't see it, well, you don't need to. It's all mostly decorative. But from ProQuest in its native state. And what you're seeing here is a search for the word law and either the word jury or judge. So something that would put it possibly in the realm of litigation. One way of thinking about litigation, not the only. And you can see 46,506 results within 1770 to 1835, which is roughly the time I'm interested in. And so the question is how to manage this. And this is, of course, not all there is. You can see the first one, whether judges or juries, whether juries or judges of fact as well as law, actually sort of sounds kind of interesting. And if one looks at it, it actually is quite interesting. You can sort of, do a typical deconstructive reading on this. That, simple things about how it merges the line between criminal and civil law, how it produces certain kind of representative crimes, murder and libel, which are the characteristic representative crimes. I think it's interesting that those keep getting paired together during this period. And we could spend a lot of time on this article quite fruitfully. And then it would be one down, 46,505 to go. All right, I'm not getting any younger. So the idea is that my hypothesis is then within British periodicals, one could see within the whole of it a kind of spreading of information, a production of information, a consolidation of it. And the reason I think that's a good place to look, even though I also look at plays and novels and my usual bag of tricks, is periodicals represent by far the most reading that gets done and has a built-in passing it on to others in ways other things have sort of different modes of circulation. And so I thought I'd just throw up, I have an 8-chapter outline for my book. Who knows how many it'll actually be. And I just wanted to show just a couple of, well, in this case, I'll just take the first one and maybe one or two others of these, right? So the first one, theatricality and the trial space. And in this, what I'm thinking about for my intro, which is tentatively titled The Theatricality of Litigation, to think about how trials are presented as if they are theatrical space, as if they are dramatic, as if they look more like a television show of a trial. If you've ever been to an actual trial, the pacing of it is hardly the ideal that one gets on a good Perry Mason, right? And so how did this theatricality come about in the Romantic period, which was the period when trials actually gained much more length. Trials before this generally ran about half an hour, if that. Again, this is English. And and then some other questions. Justice has a right in single farthing verdicts. So there are about 500 verdicts for a farthing or a penny or very small. And it was foreseeable that that would be what the verdict was. So why did people bother going to court over that? And that's hopefully will, by sort of looking at the articles relevant to that, in my chapter 4, that's this fourth one, farthing cases, the truth's the point. And I'm hoping, again, that collectively the periodicals can say more and say additional to what my usual methods can do. So I've been thinking and talking to people, some of whom are here already, that a kind of a general process, and I've left out a lot of steps, but obviously there's the problem or the process of preparing the data, figuring out how to improve the OCR. The OCR is not great. Hopefully it can get good enough. Tokenizing, which is to say, how do you create it out of the mass of data? How do you produce, how do you let the computer know what it's looking at, right? What are the strings, the bits of text that matter to you? And then following that with doing stuff with it. So one, complex searches, complex for me, simple for computers, and then other things which come out of more natural language processing. And if I'm getting some of these terms wrong, feel free to either correct me or just nod sympathetically. Topic modeling, named entity recognition, and querying by concepts rather than just simply querying by words. And then the next step is sort of figuring out how to present this as within my larger book. So the kind of, I hope, contribution this makes theoretically is to make this sort of data mining process a dialogue with these other methods that produces a larger result, as opposed to something that happens on its own. Which isn't to say that happening on its own wouldn't be a good thing, just what I'm after here. So I'm going to just walk through something very, very quickly. I don't understand most of what's up here, so not to worry about the details, especially if you can't read it. But one of the things I've been doing with Cliff Anderson in the Buchanan Fellowship that's been ongoing for a while is trying to work in Databricks, with notebooks. Okay, so notebooks are a way of basically having very complex code that someone smarter than you, among other ways you can do it, that someone smarter than you or who understands more than you can write or help you write, and then it can be used in different ways because it also allows preparing it. So in this particular one, I'm just going to show three quick slides on this one, keywords and context. This is, we're sort of looking at a smaller subset, really much smaller, just 8 articles. And we begin by importing libraries, which are to say, libraries are like collections of code that will do stuff for you, right? That you need to understand what it's doing, sort of how it's doing, but you don't need to figure out how to write the code that would do it. And I'm just going to show a few screenshots from this one notebook. The next is sort of creating the data set. And then this is just showing how to do a simple search. This is one a student did for the word reform within our little database. And you can see here at the bottom, it came up with the various times reform got used. And then it had a little output so that here you can see at the bottom, these are all the uses of reform, and it pops out very nicely. And you could read these sentences in kind of interesting ways. One could imagine doing a lot more with them, as if instead of this coming from 8 samples, it was coming from some portion of the 4 million that are in the British Periodicals database. I'm hoping only about 1 million are actually relevant to me. Feels a little cozier. So that's the kind of thing I'm doing. And I think this would be the way to sort of describe the multi-goals of this. One, as I said, it's an experiment in combining traditional methods with data mining. to developing a methodology that would be generally applicable to the study of periodical literature. So it wouldn't have to be someone just interested in law or someone just interested in British periodicals, right? One could imagine studies of this sort in the American periodical database on, I don't know, theater or whatever you like, right? And then finally, it's a pedagogical experiment in interdisciplinarity. How much can we help students learn to do this while we're learning it ourselves?